I was born in San Francisco. We moved up to Seattle in 1931. I had lived and raised on Bainbridge Island, which was pretty wild. We had chased each other around with slingshots and marbles. When we played in the woods, it was serious. My dad had taught me how to shoot. I was an expert marksman, and I'm a good infantryman. You come when you're called and you do the best you can, and when it's over, you get the hell out of there.
With America immersed in war on two fronts around the world, John Bud Hawk made the decision that college could wait. Hawk enlisted in the Army right out of high school in 1943. In 1944, his first major action brought him to the French town of Chambois. German troops had been desperately pushing their remaining personnel and heavy armament east to defend their homeland. But there was only one way back to Germany, through a tiny gap known as the Falaise Pocket. Despite being outgunned and outnumbered, the Americans were determined to defend the gap and prevent the Germans from reaching home at all costs.
Our mission simply was to stop everything we could from getting out through the gap. Well, the Germans had to stick to the roads to get out, and we cut them off. It was the worst carnage you could imagine. There were a lot of roads that were totally impassable with wreckage, so they had to try to come through the orchards. We were attacking, and they were defending. And of course, to their advantage, they knew every inch of ground that we were on. We didn't know what was in front of us. We collected up back a ways to see what we could do. I was reconnoitering through the bushes, found a lone infantryman there with a bazooka, the rocket, but he's got nobody with him. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I get trying to get these tanks that are in the brush over there, but I got no backup, and I have to put it down to load it." And I said, "Well, I'll back you." And then I loaded and defended him. He started shooting and used up all his rockets. The tanks that were in the bushes where he was left.
Though he had managed to repel a small group of enemy tanks, Hawk and his group were still badly outnumbered. With visibility and uneven terrain working against them, the American tank destroyers were forced to a standstill at the edge of the orchard.
Our position was we were on one side of a field back with the tank destroyers, and the Germans were on the other side. This stream bed, which was about 15 or 20 foot deep, was in the middle, and there was no way a tank could get across it. And tanks behind us, tanks in front of us, with visibility what it was, the tank destroyers couldn't see them. Can't see them, can't shoot them. Well, I could see them. I know darn well. You're not thinking really of the consequences. You're trying to think of a solution. If you were standing in the middle, you could see both ways. And I said, "If I line you up, will you shoot? And then we'll correct." I exposed myself standing out there trying to look like a fence post in the orchard. Say, "Go 20 feet to the left. Raise it up 3 feet." Something like that. And these guys are good. They were good. They'd put like an armor piercing right through a building. And then they would put another one in right behind it. An HE. And work. The Germans were getting shot by somebody you couldn't see. So we knocked out a couple of them, and the other one backed off. And it was literally the turning point of the whole battle.
His unlikely aiming stake maneuver stalled the German advance, but for Hawk, the day's events were far from over.
I'm feeling really smart, you know what I mean? We chased these guys out, and I'm hiding behind an apple tree, thinking fresh targets. When sun comes in range, I can see them, and I'll draw these guys' fire on them. Well, I didn't see the one tank, so he shot me right through the apple tree. Literally through the apple tree, and into my leg, and mostly through my leg. To me, it was like getting hit with a sledgehammer. And I couldn't tell whether I had a broken leg or no leg or what. It knocked me flat. But I'm either done or I can run like hell. And boy, I took off out of there like you wouldn't believe. ran around the corner of a building, and fell over another tank. Wham! Thank goodness for some kind of training, I was still carrying my rifle. I hit the ground and rolled over and looked up, and there's a German looking out of the turret on that tank, standing, probably the tank commander, up on top, trying to figure out what's going on too. Well, I recovered first and shot him, and he went plunk down in. I think to this day, I almost wish that I hadn't shot him. I don't know how I would have done it different, but to find out what he thought of that crazy American who's attacking my tank with his body, because that's what I did. I ran full tilt into that thing. I bet you could hear the clang for a mile. I recovered first and took off with this tank and one other one right behind me. And I'm headed for Mother, which is the 2 tank destroyers. They said I got about 40 yards away. Went zip down and down in the ditch. When the cannonading stopped, they came down and picked me out of the ditch. And so I went back to the aid station, and they gave me a super Band-Aid, and away we went, on into Germany.
As a result of the battle in the apple orchard, a key area of the Falaise pocket was cut off. Unable to reach their homeland, 5,000 Germans were stranded and surrendered. Sergeant Hawk continued to fight in the European theater for 5 more months and was wounded again in Germany before being sent home to Washington State to recuperate. Within 2 weeks of his return, Hawk was advised that he would receive the Medal of Honor. On June 21, 1945, President Truman presented the medal to young Bud Hawk at the state capitol in Olympia, Washington.
2 words I'm not fond of. One is hero. The other one is winner. There are no winners in a war. I think the greatest way to give of yourself and what you have to offer is by teaching. What would you give for an answer if one of these bright-eyed little darlings looks up at you and says, "Mr. Hawk, what's it like to kill somebody?" That's a kick in the gut. And you have to have an answer for them. They have complete faith, you know. They're trying to explain that the worst thing that can happen to a human being is to have to take the life of another human being. You will never, ever forget it. But you can, if you must, and you will. There is one reason that they can do that terrible thing. That reason is you. That's their only reason for doing that, is you. So you think about it on Veterans Day, because that's what it was.